the last story I want to talk to you about today, and actually this is just we talk about whether Islamic Jihad is a danger in America today. And we do mean, of course, we try to protect ourselves against potential future violent jihadist attacks. We have various governmental entities, FBI, trying to keep track of these radical terror groups and who they are and what they're planning and try to catch them before they do anything wrong. But we also have the danger of the kind of insidious hidden danger of civilization jihad or cultural jihad, where it's still the same mission of jihad to bring the world into submission under Islam, but it's done more subtly. Well, I'm going to turn and talk about something that happened in Miami, and I think we talked about this story right when it occurred. But in Miami, at the Miami airport, there was an arrest of a guy who was he was an airline mechanic for American Airlines. This incident occurred on July 17th. He was the last guy to check this American Airlines flight before it was to take off. He allegedly put inside the plane, not inside where the passengers sit, but inside near the engine, a very small device that essentially, when heated, would have set off and would have caused the plane to crash, killing everyone on board. So this guy was arrested, and the good news was at least he was arrested. But I want to tell you a little bit about this guy to make my points about Islamization in America. To start with, the guy is named Abdul Majid Maruf Ahmed Alani. Last name Alani, A-L-A-N-I. His name is Abdul Majid Maruf Ahmed Alani. The incident occurred July 17th in Miami. Fortunately, as the pilots, with every 150 people on board, are just taxiing down the runway about to take off, a warning light came on and they aborted the flight. They did not take off. When they discovered what caused the warning light was this device stuck in the plane by this employee of American Airlines, Alani, who is Muslim. They discovered he'd been the one that did that. They arrested him, and he first said that he had done that because he was very upset about the labor negotiations going on between the union he was a member of as a mechanic and the airline, and that's why he did it. He was really, really upset about this, didn't like the negotiations, so he didn't really want the plane to crash, you see. He just wanted the maintenance to be, the light to go off, the flight to be aborted. He might get some overtime hours so that he could get more hours because he's upset about the union negotiation. I mean, it's a silly story. That's what he said. He also had, by the way, deliberately asked to change his schedule, so he had this early morning time when very few people were around, when he was the one inspecting and finalizing the inspection for this plane. I'll tell you a few facts about this guy, Alani. Number one, he'd been in America. He'd been an airline mechanic. He's 60 years old, or 62 or something, 60 years old. He'd been an airline mechanic for 30 years. He'd been in America at least 30 years. He had been fired by Alaska Airlines in 2008 for what they called maintenance mistakes. So he'd been a mechanic. I don't know why someone who's fired by Alaska would be hired by American, but there you go. So he'd been in America 30 years. He had seen American culture and society. He had seen what freedom looks like. He had seen the greatness of America, that you can live in this country and you can live in freedom and you can live your life where you want, you can move where you want, that you have the opportunity to pursue prosperity. You have the opportunity to live your life in freedom. You have the opportunity to choose your religion, change your religion, have no religion at all. The government isn't going to do anything to you. He had seen the goodness of the American people. He's worked for American Airlines for 30 years. He had seen his fellow employees, and assume some of them were his friends, that he's seen people at the airport and all in excitement going on a trip to go to wherever they're going to go on vacation. They're going to visit grandma. He'd known what airlines and airports represent. A lot of people having family vacations. He knew what the airports represent in terms of business travel and keeping commerce moving in America. He had 30 years to watch American culture, to recognize the goodness of America. And he decided, based on all he'd seen, to try to take down an airliner with 150 people on board, because he could. because he was an airline mechanic. And what I'm telling you is, when we talk about the danger of Islam in this country, I'm not talking about every single Muslim. I'm talking about Islam itself. The guy has been studying the Quran for 30 years. He's been reading what the Quran tells him, hearing what the imams tell him, hearing what he learns at his mosque. And so for 30 years, seeing all of America's goodness, it could not override, in his worldview, the virtue, the mission of killing Americans he did not know. So understand a few things about this guy. When they finally discovered when they went to investigate a little further after he's been arrested, he had terrorist ISIS videos on his cell phone. His brother is a member of ISIS. America taken him in, by the way. America took him in as a refugee from Iraq. So he comes from Muslim majority, very unsettled, very dangerous country, comes to America, sees all the freedom and goodness, and all he can think about is finally fulfilling his duty as a good Muslim to kill innocent people. So they find on his cell phone video of the Iraq, horrible Islamic terror attacks. His own brother was a member of ISIS. He told FBI agents he had an evil side that made him do this. So this is a guy who was evidence clear as can be about what he was all about. But I want to just tell you what the New York Times headline was in talking about this case. The New York Times headlines: American Airlines mechanic accused of plane sabotage may have ties to terrorists, U.S. says. May have ties, like maybe we're not sure yet. We need to be more able in this country to deal honestly with the threat posed by Islam. We need to recognize it's not every Muslim, but Islam itself, the Quran, the Hadith, the holy texts that Muslims study all over this country, in Islamic schools, in mosques. We have to be honest with ourselves and not have that stick our fingers in our ear and say, la, 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 I can't hear what you're saying. When you hear someone arrested who works for American Airlines and who deliberately almost got away with killing 150 people, innocent people. And I raise it to say we're getting close to the end. We got to go to why it matters to you. But I tell you this story because I love this country and I want people in this country to be safe. I want us to be able to deal honestly with the problems and challenges that we face. I want us to be able to recognize that a guy who's lived in America and been employed in America and seen our culture and seen the goodness of America could live here 30 plus years and still decide one day, I think I'll blow up an airplane because I can. And that comes from, not because he's a bad guy. He is a bad guy. But it's not because he's a bad guy. It's because the teachings of the Quran tell him to do those things. Because the teachings of Islam say he should. We need to be willing to talk about these hard things and call out the truth and say the truth when it's true.